In today's video, we're going to be talking about some more of those mistakes that you can make when you start watercolor painting. Today I'm going to tell you about some mistakes that I narrowly avoided making, more by luck than by judgment, but nevertheless useful lessons to be learned. Hopefully by watching this video you can avoid making those same mistakes yourself. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel you'll find all things watercolor, even a little bit of business and motivational stuff too. Please do consider subscribing. It's free, and if you click the bell icon you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. Now, in a recent video, I talked about things that I wish I'd known before I started watercolor painting, huge mistakes that I made right at the beginning of my art journey. Now, today we're going to do something a little bit different, but it's still connected. So I'm going to talk about the mistakes that I didn't make at the beginning, things that I got right. Now, of course, this is mostly luck. When you start a new hobby, you don't know what you don't know. And it'll be a mixture of sort of serendipity and getting a few things right and probably getting a lot of things wrong. So most of the things I'm going to talk about in this video, I got right. I'll explain why I got them right, why I'm so pleased I got them right. There are one or two that I initially got wrong, but changed very, very quickly when I realized the error of my ways. And it doesn't really matter if you're watching a video for mistakes that somebody made or mistakes that somebody avoided. There's still mistakes, and I want you to learn from the benefit of my experience so you can jump a little bit ahead and you're not wasting time making silly mistakes that if only you had known, you too could have avoided at the beginning. And let's face it, it's never too late for any of us, me included, to realize mistakes that we're making, make a change and improve our painting practice. Now, the first thing that I did right, and this was definitely complete luck, is I bought decent quality materials. So I won't go into my whole life story here, but after painting and drawing, all the time as a child and a young adult, I gave up painting for many years because people around me told me that I couldn't do it, basically. So I might make another video about that. Would you like to know why I gave up painting for a whole decade through listening to other people? Let me know in the comments and maybe I'll make that video for you. Anyhow, I was in my early 30s and my daughter was quite young, and we were on this family holiday, lots of us, and I wandered into an art shop that also had a gallery area by the coast in Cornwall. Now, there were lots of paintings of boats and seascapes there, as you would imagine, and on the wall there were some pen and wash pictures of boats. I remember thinking to myself, why doesn't the pen run if they're putting watercolour on top? I really was being rather dumb because it was just a waterproof pen. So I got chatting to the owner of this place. Now, some people who work in art shops can be rather pretentious and rather intimidating, but he was actually really, really lovely. And he talked about selling me these paints, and I bought a set of paints, and they were pan paints. Now, I've since given them to my daughter, but I think from memory I'm pretty sure they were Winsor and Newton Professional. I think I bought one or two what would have been good quality synthetic brushes, perhaps something like a Daler-Rowney Daylon. And I bought a pad of decent quality watercolour paper. It probably would have been Bockingford. I'm pretty sure it's one of the Cuthbert's Mill products. Anyway, what I'm saying is that these were all reasonable quality materials, and in fact the paints were artist quality. Now, I do understand that when you're starting out on a new hobby you don't want to waste loads of money and you don't want to spend too much, but I do always advise people to buy at least student quality materials, because it can be really disheartening if you start out, and I can only imagine what would have happened if I had bought really, really poor quality materials. If I'd picked them up in, one of these sort of drugstores or stationers that we have in the UK, one of these big super centre places, and I'd just picked up these very cheap paints and they didn't have a lot of pigment in, I think I'd have been discouraged from carrying on painting very, very quickly. So that's the first thing that I got right. As I said, it was completely accidental. I bought decent quality materials. Now, the next thing I got right is right from the beginning I started stretching my watercolour paper, and that's just because it was how I was shown to do it. I didn't realise there was another way of painting, to be honest. I started out working on loose sheets, and then the tutor who was teaching us, and this is a chap that I went to for many years, a botanical artist, though he did other subjects too, but he was mostly a botanical artist, and about 2 or 3 lessons into our first short course, he showed us how to stretch watercolour paper. It was really, really quick and easy. I still teach the same method myself. If you'd like to look at that video, I'll put it up in the information card above. If you don't see it there, have a look in the video description. I'll put the link down there too. It's a really quick and simple method of stretching watercolour paper, and to me this just seemed logical. If you don't want your paper to go bumpy, you don't want to have to worry about it again, you stretch it onto board. I just assumed that it was the professional way of working, and I would assert actually that it is still the professional way of working. Now, of course, it's hugely controversial. Lots of you are going to disagree with me. Lots of you are going to disagree in the comments and say, well, I never stretch, I just use thick paper, I just use blocks, this, that and the other. Of course, all of those things are possible, but for me, nothing beats a drawing board with properly stretched paper. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, this is not something I need to do as a beginner, it's not important, it's more important just to lay down the paint, let me assure you that working on paper that goes really, really bumpy will physically affect your painting progress. And that's because dips in the paper will cause the paint to puddle. Puddled paint causes uneven drying, and this causes back runs and drying lines and heartache all round. Now, of course, it's personal choice. I'm not the paper stretching police. I would like to be, actually, because I might get a nice hat to wear. I'm not the paper stretching police, but I do encourage you, if you've heard people talk very negatively about paper stretching, go on and on about what a faff it is, how difficult it is, what a nuisance it is, I really encourage you to think about it again, because actually it's a really, really simple process. And once you've learned it, I can stretch a sheet of paper in less time than it takes me to make a cup of tea. So I'm really grateful that I was taught to stretch paper. It just came to me as a matter of course. I didn't think it was a big deal. I just thought it was how you started a painting. Even today, it's still the way that I start all of my watercolor paintings. It takes no time at all. It saves me loads of money. And I really enjoy that feeling of cutting the paper off the board at the end and it being completely flat. And one last thing to add here is I've seen lots of advice and lots of tutorials on ways of flattening a bumpy watercolor painting after you've finished it. All of those methods of getting the painting flat are far more complicated and far less likely to succeed than just starting to work on stretch paper. And I'm so grateful that I was taught to do this right at the beginning of my painting journey. At this point, if you're getting some value from this free video, if you're finding it helpful, can I please ask you just to click that like button, to click that thumbs up. YouTube rewards channels with audience interaction, so by clicking like, sharing, subscribing, or even leave me a comment, you help my channel to grow, and I'm so grateful to all of you who watch me on YouTube. The next mistake that I'm so grateful I avoided is starting to paint without looking carefully at my colours and making colour charts. So I've always been quite an organised person and nobody really showed me this, but it just seemed to me to be very logical that I would swatch my colours, the colours from my paint box, onto a piece of paper before I started. Now, they weren't the best colour charts in the world. They certainly weren't the most complex colour charts. Initially, they were just little squares of the colour that was in the paint box. That was as far as I went. I didn't add, more or less water. I didn't mix them with other colours to see what I would get, but I did at least start making colour charts. And as I got more experienced, I did expand to make colour charts for secondary colours and mixed colours and all of those. Now, looking back, I do wish that I had actually spent more time looking at the properties of the paint. So in other words, not just mixing colours, but also considering which colours were transparent, which colours granulated, which colours were weak, and which colours were strong staining colours. Nevertheless, I got a lot of this right. And let me assure you, if you've just started painting and you haven't made colour charts now, stop painting, stop whatever you're working on and make yourself some colour charts. The little labels and the little squares that you get and the little colours on the end of coloured pencils, none of them are accurate. You need to put those colours down on a piece of paper so that you can actually see what they look like, and you need to add varying amounts of water. This is the very most basic type of colour chart that just shows you the colour on its own as it is. If you never get further than this and you never make colour charts that are about mixing colours together, at least understand what your colours look like and what they look like in different strengths. So in other words, you want to apply them thickly and then you want to apply them with more water. If you're using something like watercolor pencils or even colored pencils, any colored medium whatsoever, you should always swatch first. Then you can just shade with the colored pencils. In other words, just go light to dark. But you do need to know what your colors look like before you lay them down. I'm so pleased that I made color charts at the beginning of my painting journey because it has just been such a help to me. You can't work blind, you can't mix colours if you don't know what those colours are, you can't select colours if you don't know what they look like. So do take time to make colour charts. I'm really pleased that it's something that I did right at the beginning. Now the next thing I'm pleased I got right at the beginning, and I only got this partially right because I didn't do this immediately, but I did do it fairly early on. I almost included it in the mistakes that I made video because it's really, really important, but it was something that I started doing wrong and then very, very quickly corrected. So I think it's okay to include it in this video. And the mistake that I made and then very quickly corrected is that I started out not keeping a record of my paintings and then selling a few of them and not having any photographs. So not only did I not have a physical record, and I remember these paintings so clearly in my head, I wish I could see them again, but I either didn't photograph them or I didn't take a good enough quality photograph, and I didn't actually keep a record of what I'd done and where they were. So you might think to yourself, well, I don't want to be a professional artist, I don't need to keep track of my paintings. Now, personally, I think it's a good idea to keep a record and keep track of any of your possessions, but also you will be amazed to find, even if you're a beginner, that people will want your artwork. So I see this all the time. You know, I get beginners in my Facebook group and they'll say, oh, I'm really surprised, my sister wants me to do a painting for her. Oh, my mother would like this painting, I think I need to put it in a frame. So whatever it is, it may not be that you're selling formally, but it may just be that you give gifts to friends, that family members ask you to paint things for them, or that people that you know just want your artwork. You may even get commissions or offers of sales, and this can come completely as an unexpected surprise. And so the temptation is just to sort of give these things away without thinking of the value of them, but also without thinking about the fact that you might actually miss being able to look at those things. So I do advise that at the very least you take a clear photograph of your work. You must do this before it goes into a frame if it has glass on it, because it's almost impossible to photograph it well after that. If you think that you are going to be doing prints of your work or taking things more professionally, then you also want to consider whether you need to get those things professionally scanned. I always have my originals professionally scanned before I let go of the originals, so that I have a good quality image that I can use for making prints. And also, if you do intend to be a bit more professional or semi-professional with your work, you want to consider as well keeping a log and giving reference numbers to your paintings. If you're selling paintings on somewhere like Etsy, you're going to need to know what size they are. You know, don't be faffing around trying to find the painting and then to measure it. Just keep a simple record at the very beginning, a simple book or a spreadsheet. You want to log things like the size of the painting, the title, maybe the date that you made it. That could be, as mine is, incorporated into a reference number. And you also want to keep track of where the painting is. If you're selling limited edition prints, you'll also need to keep a separate record so you know how many prints that you have sold. It may seem like a simple process, but it's something that I figured out pretty quickly, because what happened was I sold 2 or 3 of my original paintings. I didn't have a decent photograph of them. I couldn't make prints of them. And more important than those professional problems was the fact that I just couldn't look at them anymore. Please, please, please photograph your work before you let it go. And as it's easy to forget to do this later on, it may actually be something you need to go through. I have a routine when I finish a painting. There are processes that I go through. It gets logged, it gets named, it gets referenced, it gets measured, it certainly gets photographed, and it gets scanned, or possibly it may get scanned later on if I sell the original and then I'm going to post the original. I'll go and get it scanned quickly so that I have the option of making prints in the future. Even if you are a complete beginner, even if you have no intention of ever working professionally, please take clear photographs of your work. It's not just a matter of selling or giving away the work. What if something happened to that? What if you had a house fire or spilt a cup of coffee? You really do need a photographic record of your work, and it's something I learned very, very early on, right at the start of my watercolor painting journey. Another mistake that I'm glad I avoided at the beginning of my painting journey, at the beginning of working as a semi-professional and then a professional artist, I'm glad I avoided underpricing my work, and I always asked a fair price for my work. Now, of course, when you're starting out, you're going to ask for less money. And as I spoke about in the last point, you may have not even considered selling your work. I can assure you that sooner or later somebody will offer to buy something, and you need to have an answer to that offer. Even if it's a family member and you're happy to give that piece of work away, you want to consider other factors. Does the family member that you're giving this piece of work to expect you to pay for a frame? Or are they commissioning you to do something? Perhaps you could ask them to pay just for the materials. So you want to consider pricing right from the beginning, and don't be taken aback when somebody asks to buy a piece of your work, because when you have no answer prepared and that offer comes completely out of the blue, that's when you're likely to end up just giving your work away for almost nothing. So do have a think about that conversation. Think about what you would say if somebody offered to buy something from you, and understand that there's no comfortable way to have this conversation. And sooner or later, you are just going to have to set a price and let people walk away. You cannot ever allow buyers to set the price of your work. It's something that you must do yourself. I do have other videos on this channel about how to price your work, so you can have a look at those as well. But understand that when somebody buys something from you, they will always want to pay less. You do not have to accept that. However much of a beginner or an amateur you are, you still put a lot of yourself, a lot of love into the artwork that you created. Don't always give it away for free. One of the worst things that I did, actually, I sometimes give work to charities, to auction, to gain money from the charity. One of the worst things I did was to give a really valuable original painting away. and I was told that this would be auctioned at a very large event, one of those events where rich people pay lots of money to sit at the tables, and that it would fetch a good price. As it was, the event was poorly attended and my watercolour painting was sold for peanuts. Now, whilst I was happy to raise money for the charity, this obviously was very, very upsetting for me. So whatever the circumstances of you giving or selling your work away, do think in advance about the value of this work and what you would like in return. Don't undervalue yourself, don't undervalue your skills and your artwork. If someone isn't prepared to pay what you think that they should be paying for your artwork, then simply let them walk away. I'm so pleased that right from the beginning of my working life, I still charged a decent, fair price for my efforts. So the next mistake that I didn't make was I didn't think too small, and I didn't limit my possibilities as an artist. Basically, I said yes to everything that came my way. If I was offered to take part in an exhibition or join an art society, or even something like an online challenge, if I was asked to give a little demonstration, if I was asked to go and talk about watercolour painting, if I was asked to teach a class, anything and everything that was completely out of my comfort zone, I said yes to. Now, whether you're working as a professional or whether you're working as an amateur, I suggest you just say yes to stuff. So what if somebody says to you there's a little competition for the local newspaper, or maybe it's a Facebook challenge and it's landscape painting, and you think, well, I've only ever painted flowers, I don't paint landscapes. Just do it, just have a go. Just throw yourself into that challenge. You will learn so much by doing it. Now, this is, I have to say, if any of you are watching me and you're more experienced artists or perhaps semi-professional artists, this is the exact opposite to the advice that I would give you now. I have a business mentor, and this is the exact opposite of the advice he gives to me now. So there's a difference between what you should do when you're starting out and what you should do when you're established and more experienced. So when you're more experienced, not only do you know your strengths and your weaknesses, but you really have to focus on just a few things. Even if you're working as an amateur artist, you really have to sort of hone down and start to focus on the things that you know you are good at and not be waylaid by a load of other distractions. But when you're starting out, it's a really great thing just to say yes to everything. You'll be amazed at the opportunities that come your way. You'll be amazed at the opportunities to grow and to learn things and to try new experiences and to take part in new things, to join new clubs, to meet new people, to try out new materials. You'll absolutely be astonished what will happen if you just start to say yes to all of these things that come your way. The next time you have an opportunity, be brave, just enter. It doesn't matter if you don't come anywhere, it doesn't matter if you fail or if you don't get picked. Don't be worrying about that stuff. All that's important is you have these experiences and that you grow as an artist and you try new things. There are all sorts of subjects when I started painting that I thought I didn't actually like painting. There are all sorts of mediums that I didn't think I enjoyed. Allow yourself just to naturally go along the path of art and take up those opportunities when they come to you. Maybe there's a competition to win some oil painting supplies and you think, well, I don't do oil painting. Just enter the competition. It could be the start of something really big for you. You could find that you win, you could find that you love oil painting. So at the beginning of your journey as an artist, do what I did, more through craziness than braveness. I just chucked myself into everything and said yes to anything and just had a go. And if you're just starting your painting journey, I suggest that you also are brave and fearless. Throw yourself into things, have a go at things, don't be upset if they don't work. It's all a learning process and it will help you to find the right path for you and to become the artist that you are meant to be. So the next mistake that I'm so pleased I avoided is that I started out with a really positive attitude. I didn't go into it feeling negative or feeling like I wouldn't be any good at stuff. Even though I made tons of mistakes and made tons of bad paintings, I always believed that I could do better. So one thing that I hear time and time again, I've heard this in real life classes and I've also heard this a lot in Facebook groups. There are Facebook groups for beginners, and there'll always be a few experienced artists in those groups, which is good because experienced artists like me can help beginners. However, often the beginners are completely intimidated by the more experienced or by the professional artists. And what I hear said so often is, look at those people, look at how good they are, I might as well give up now. And I heard this as well. I remember going to the very first painting classes that I went to, the little groups I was telling you about earlier. I went in there and I remember the difference in attitude from me to other people. So our tutor would show us his work and it was astonishing. It was stunning. It was a million times better than any of us could ever achieve. And everyone in the class except me said exactly the same thing. They said it out loud. I kept my thoughts quiet because I felt that I would be arrogant if I spoke like that in the class. But they said out loud, they said, oh God, look at that. It's so wonderful. You know, why do we even bother? Why do we come to class? What's the point of carrying on? You know, why are we here? So something else was going on in my head. I was looking at the work of our tutor, which was stunningly beautiful. And I was looking at that and I was thinking, I'm going to paint like that one day. I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to try so hard. I'm going to learn so much. I'm not going to stop until I can paint as well as that. So do you see the difference? Do you see the difference in attitude? What you tell yourself will come true. If you tell yourself that you will never be as good as those professional artists, if you tell yourself that you will never reach a high standard, then I guarantee you will be correct. Now, don't be taking cues from fellow artists. Take your cues from people in business and from people in sports. Did you ever see Muhammad Ali go into the ring and they interviewed him just before a big boxing match and he said, oh God, I think I'm going to get pulverized here. I don't think I've got any chance of success. He knew exactly what that attitude would do. It would kill his chance of success. He would be sure to fail because his brain had told him he was going to fail. So I don't know why I had that different narrative to people around me, but I want you to have this narrative in future. When you're looking at work which is much, much better than yours, which you think is completely unachievable, I want you to stop telling yourself that you might as well give up. What is the point of that? It is of no help to you whatsoever to think that way. When you see that fantastic artwork, I want you to say to yourself, one day I'll have that much control over the brush, one day I'll be able to mix colours like that. One day people will be admiring my work like they admire the work of this artist that I am looking at now. Now, of course, realism comes into it. You might be thinking, well, it's all very well for you to say, but I don't have a lot of talent in this area. But there have been multiple studies done across multiple disciplines that have shown that actually natural talent is a very, very small factor in success. If you don't know what deliberate practice is, I do have a video about that. I'll link to it in the information cards above and also in the description of this video. But basically, deliberate practice is a type of practice where you practice and then you analyze where you are going right and where you're going wrong. So stop with a negative attitude. When you see someone's work that is better than yours, look at it as something that you can travel towards, somewhere where you would like to be, as a future goal. If you tell yourself negative things, you're guaranteed to have a negative outcome. So do let me know in the comments if anything I have talked about has resonated with you today. And before you leave this video, do remember to pop into the video description. I've got several free downloadable PDFs there that you can grab for no money whatsoever. And while we're on the subject of mistakes, if you'd like some more practical ways of correcting very simple painting mistakes, actual mistakes that you make with your paintbrush and your watercolours, I have the perfect video for you. It'll show you how to correct the 10 most common watercolour painting mistakes that I've seen myself as a tutor over the years. You can watch that video right now.